Noise, confusion is sound, negative imagery holding us down, social delusion clearly constructed, human condition, morals corrupted, trapped in reaction, lawlessness, war, dissatisfaction from bowels to core, devil's technology, strategy for, human mythologies, urban folklore, sicker psychology, counterfeit cure, wicked theology robbing the poor, scheme demonology mislead the pure, stricken strategically studying war, light shown in darkness, image exposed, few can see through the new emperor's clothes, lustful this hustle turns humans to hoes, when the blind lead the blind, just more trouble and woes. It's the mind that they chose, it's designed to stay closed. Standards of jokers, court jester logic, cyclic and cosmic from schoolyard to college. Primitive man in his civilized knowledge, system collapsing he still won't acknowledge. God is the savior, studies behavior, trying to fix the mixed mind that he gave you. Stiff-necked scholars on prescription meds, wishing their problems was all in their heads. Moral dilemma, pride at the root, misguided from youth, heart divided from truth. Egyptians and Grecians, spiritually dead, empirically led by the good gods in their heads. Motives and thoughts, industrial wealth, global economy in it for self. Heart full of madness, covered with kind, pleasure designed to take over your mind. Furnished in godliness, painted in good, this tainted priesthood's got real saints misunderstood. While classes and government set up the veil and cultivate minds for more mythical tales. Typical Hollywood, follies, good girl, while vice and corruption take over the world. Motives and thoughts. Check your motives and thoughts. Time with the wickedness deep in your heart. Modern day wickedness is all you've been taught. Lie to your neighbors so you get ahead. Modern day trickery is all you've been fed. Motives and thoughts. Check your motives and thoughts. Thank you. You know, people gotta leave something alone, you know. They gotta be nothing again so they can be something all the time. I established a number of different precedents. They were in my head. They originated in my mind. And I manifested them and gave people a form and a way and a direction and a shape and watched people take advantage of my insecurity or false humility and turn me off for a while. Now that I've matured a little bit, I learned how to shut down. You know what I mean? It's like an athlete, it's just like an athlete, it's no different. Yeah. You gotta learn how to shut down. You have to learn how to stop, how to relax. But I stayed, you know, on for a lot of years. On go. A lot of years. Let's say you're an Olympic sprinter. Okay? Now, we all know the type of fight that's required to get your body prepared for that type of race. Okay, can you do that with a camera in your face and a publicist next to you saying smile? No, I mean, you gotta remember what happened to me. My young life was sort of, you know, it was a period of time I wasn't allowed to be young, and now I'm sort of getting back into youth again. It's very responsible, you know. You know, and part of me fears acknowledging, like, yo, you know, what do I enjoy?
Look into the camera and say, hi, I'm Lauryn Hill, and I am a force of nature.
Okay. I'll say I am Lauryn Hill. Okay. Happy to be here tonight. I am Lauryn Hill.
Oh, you?
MTV Ninja turns 10 this year, and we'd just like you to wish MTV a happy birthday.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
I'm not too cool on the promo, so I'll probably be listening.
Okay, great.
Feel like we have to exist in caricature and non-reality. And some might argue, you know, well, that's show business, honey. And I go, you're right. That's why I'm having such a hard time defining what I do, who I am and what I am. Because it feels a little uncomfortable to put it on. Art and commerce, how did the two, you know, the relationship has always been art does its thing. Here you go, commerce. You know, but now commerce wants to control art, which it ceases to be art anymore. How's commerce gonna control art? The score is metaphoric for like settling the score. That's what it means. We got a couple scores to settle. We got, you know, some scores with the critics who thought that we should disband for nonsense reasons. You know what I mean? Are the parts where you know, the Pharisees, they really want to say certain things, but they don't really want to reveal their motives. You get me? They really don't want to reveal how much they hate this man. You know, so they try to cover it. And we know that God or Jesus is just the truth. So what they really hated was the truth. They hated the truth. I'm here to do the best that I can. I'm here to improve. I'm here to get better. I'm here to honor God for my gift. Not you. Prima donna. When he told me what prima donna actually meant, I'm a created thing. I'm here for him. You know, all the people I've grown up around, they all prima donna was always like, you know, a cuss word. It's a cuss word. So was diva. And those are the most complimentary, supreme, majestic. It's like saying queen. But it's not like saying queen like queen. It's like saying queen like standard. You guys try to make me come across like I'm too demanding. You'll say things like, you know, you tried every pianist in New York. But the truth is that you need to know that like Jimi Hendrix, when he was auditioning a drummer, he had to find that special guy because he was beyond special. You understand that? Everybody couldn't play with him. No matter how they played kick, snare, and hi-hat. They couldn't play with him because he was going someplace else. They couldn't follow him. You see? So it's the same thing musically. You gotta find the folks who can go with you. Everybody wants perfect art, right?
Everybody wants perfect art.
Mm-hmm. But then they don't want you to be a perfectionist.
I would see people, I mean, they'd have all these opinions, and these opinions would come with such confidence. Oh, that's not a real musician, because a real musician, I'm like, you know what? Maybe you have a limited concept of real. Who made you the judge of reality? You know, you got a lot of opinions, you know, I mean, just being declared as authoritative truth.
If the world is shallow, it either so chooses to be or it's shallow because it doesn't want to feel anything uncomfortable. And so it can't really go past the realm of feeling to find out whether or not there's life outside of the way our emotions have been programmed. You understand what I'm trying to say? So I got to see a lot of bluffs, not because, you know, I could just call them, but because I had something told me, go past this uncomfortable feeling. And the more consistently I did that, the more I realized that my realm of emotions was rather limited. There are many people in the artistic arena who, for fear of being unpopular, allow people to remain in delusion. Anyone who stares in a mirror long enough and is constantly getting dressed and fixing their faces and putting on makeup, ultimately there's some form of psychosis that happens, and all of a sudden you start wanting your real face to be that airbrushed image. People are living in the sitcom called My Life. You know, image, pretense. You know, how can you complete anything of any real value in a fake place? Being a fake thing. The sun revolves around the earth. Man and his ego and his arrogance. You know, life should conform to my concept of it. Don't tell me I have to change and adjust to it. That's insane. Let's say you're born in redemption. How to stay in redemption. Let's say you're born unredeemed. How to get to redemption. But everything around you is pointing to the exact opposite. Oh, it's hopeless. I've seen, you know, great art direction. I've seen great packaging. I've seen great fashion. But all related to the external part of man. I don't see anybody speaking or reaching the soul or speaking to, you know, the core of man, stimulating the mind. It's almost like there's nothing to talk about.
I don't want to have blood on my hands, you hear that? But what I mean when I say that, you have blood on your hands when you're dishonest. You know, people just try to save pride, they try to save face, instead of establishing a dynamic that says they want. What's going on is God is making it so I only respond to the truth. I don't get no butterflies in my stomach unless it's the truth. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to be honest that the person that I had portrayed publicly was only a portion of myself. And that I had a broader perspective than what I had allowed. I grew up conforming myself. And I kind of got tired of it. It became heavy. And publicly, you know, quite frankly, I started to get relatively tormented because I'd become too accessible and a little too insincere. You know, people sort of throwing their expectations on me. I came to terms with the fact that I had created this public persona, this public illusion, and it held me hostage. Like I couldn't be a real person because you're too afraid of, you know, of what your public will say. And at that point, I had to do some dying and really accept the fact that, look, this is who I am, and I have to be who I am, and all of us have a right to be who we are. And whenever we submit our will, because our will is a gift, it's given to us. Whenever we submit our will to someone else's opinion, you know, I mean, a part of us dies. I'm saying this. What I'm saying is we deal with reality right now. I'm saying let's deal with the basis of right now. We're talking about how we were kings and queens. That's all good. We discovered math and science, but now let's master math and science for right now. So we can have economic power. We have to deal within ourselves and eliminate them from our equation completely. We keep on dealing like the white man. You know, as soon as you say the white man took everything away from me, that means you got to give him props for everything that you do have. Because every time that he took something away, that means he left, you know what I'm saying? He took his noose out. He took his pressure off just a little bit so that you could win.
It is truly a blessing from God. And I am so thrilled, so proud, and so honored to present you with the 1999 Essence Award. Enough respect, my darling. Love you.
Wherever I go, low or high places, I have to represent the truth. And, you know, when you find enlightenment, once the lights are turned on, you realize that you've been in the dark for a long time. And when the lights were turned on in my life, I realized that I had been in the dark, and that my entire purpose on earth was to be a servant. And I want to let young people know I want to let young people know that it is not a burden to love him and to represent him and to be who you are, as fly and as hot and as whatever, and to still love God and to serve him. It's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. The honor to me has less to do with the award. You know what I'm saying? To me, that translates in the relationship that I have with the audience, and if my music is helpful to them.
If you don't mind, it'd be cool if you could tell me what is your favorite color that you got, and also I need 4 reasons from you why you like it.
Why I like the color? I recently have really started digging white.
White?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. I think white on my skin, you know what I mean? Because my skin is dark, you know, so I think the white looks beautiful on my skin, you know what I mean?
Industry has a tendency to think that there's always some male puppet master, some puppeteer, you know, pulling the strings, and women are just like, you know, and then all we do is diva. To this day, I don't know what that really means. I remember doing interviews with the guys, and, you know, and the interviewer would be like, you know, now, Wyclef, tell us about your thoughts on the world. Pras, what do you think of hip-hop as an industry? Lauren, what is your favorite color of lipstick? I'd be like, no. Like, why are you asking me that?
For us, it was just fun, though. You know, we had a love for the music first. We weren't trying to be entertainers. We were trying to be musicians. That's the difference. You have a lot of kids who are trying to be entertainers. They're trying to, you know, be famous. And that's not really what you should be attracted to, because within fame, there's a lot of danger. There's a lot of pitfalls and stuff. For us, it's the music that we love. That's what inspires us to do what we do. We didn't know what would come of it, just because I enjoyed it. You know, and to me, that's a reflection of love. When someone can see you enjoying yourself and want to participate or want to encourage or want to help you to do something that you enjoy. You know, it wasn't about making her a star. It was just, hey, she likes to do this, let's support it. And by enjoying it, because I loved it, it enabled me to get better at what I was doing, you know what I mean? Because there was a love behind it. It wasn't like, I've got to do this, you know, there wasn't just, you know, naked ambition. I really enjoyed what I was doing. And all the while that I enjoyed it, I was happy doing it. I was content doing it, whether it was for 3 squirrels in the park or, you know, for 3 acorns as compensation. I mean, it didn't matter to me.
So you just have to be very, very headstrong, very prayed up, very protected, because there's a lot that could force an individual to compromise. And to me, for me to make music, it doesn't really make sense for me to make music if I can't make something that has a purpose. So let's say, you know, I could have put out music 3 years ago. If there really wasn't a purpose attached to it, I don't know that I would have been interested.
I want to condescend. There are a lot of people who condescend to the audience. You know, they just think, oh, they like anything. Just throw a beat on it and put your voice on it. But if it doesn't move me, then I don't think it's worthy enough to put out there and move someone else. You know what I mean? Like it has to be something that is personally, you know, is something that I need personally. That's my barometer for whether or not it's good for the people. Not just anything, just, you know, just make a beat, it's hot, throw it out there. You know, that I can't use that barometer. That doesn't work with me.
Making music is a labor of love, and there also has to be an enormous amount of love involved in what I'm doing, and a purpose.
The pitfalls, the snares, the traps, and they don't stop. They keep coming. You know, they don't stop. I think that because I grew up in such a loving family structure, I thought that everybody did. And therefore, I thought that everybody reaped the benefit of that love. And pretty naive way to think. And so I learned very important lessons about people and their voids. And how when you have voids, you know, like a black hole just sucks, you know, and consumes everything into it, you know. And I met a lot of those people. You know, here I was, this ship. I just want to love, you know, and I met a lot of black holes, a lot of people with a lot of deep, deep, painful voids.
I think that people react to money, power, fame differently. And it can be very dangerous. And for me, because my peace of mind, my sanctity, you know, the things that I did, they came from a very spiritual place. So my environment had to be even more pure and sanctified than the average person's, which, when you're sort of in the lion's den, you know, seems extreme. It's like, well, why do you have to do things that way? And, you know, and you appear difficult, but they don't necessarily realize that you're difficult because A, what you do is difficult, you know, and B, in order to produce something that's really special, you know, it requires a very serious environment. You know, the same way scientists, you know, require an extremely clean laboratory and controlled environment in order to, you know, create what they do and to do the experiments that they do and produce the things that help society.
I don't have an American dream. I have a dream because my dream relates to the entire world. That is that the entire world, you know, have salvation. That the entire world have joy. That the entire world know God and have peace and have his rest and his happiness. You know, for me to limit that and say that that's an American dream, that would be far too limiting. That's a dream for this entire world. That we really all have the presence of God in our lives, because God showed me I can sing songs about love. I can sing songs about me, and those people enjoy those songs. But when they're desperately, desperately in need of help, what will my music do? How will it help them? Will it redeem them? Will it save them? Will it fight that battle for them? You know, it's just a song.
You can't do nothing, and now creativity is impossible because all you can think about is all these folks that, you know, you're supporting and carrying, and, you know, it's not good. You know, a friend of mine says that every tub has to stand on his own bottom, you know. And in that respect, we all get to do what our passion is. See, that's what praising God is all about. It's doing your passion. You know, it's not useless, worthless ritual, you know, monotonous ritual where we just show up and can't wait to see the game. You know, it's doing your passion, fulfilling your passion. You know, that's how we're thankful. That's how we say we appreciate the opportunity to be alive.
To understand than to be understood. I pray now to learn how to love than to be loved. Because God has given me an abundance, so, you know, I don't need God. These people don't understand me. They think I'm crazy. Every time I'm on the mic, they just, you know, it's not about that. I pray that I understand them so that I can talk to them, minister to them even more. You know, when I thought I was my most wise, it's really not wise at all. And in my humility, you know, and in those places that most people wouldn't expect a lesson to come from, that's where I learned so much. For me now, I'm learning that it's more important to be righteous than to be right. I've tried to be right. You know, this is right. This is an injustice. This is a travesty. I'm right. But I've been very unrighteous and still right. Oh my God, you know, because you can attack someone completely right, but it doesn't resolve anything. You know, it doesn't solve your problem. You know, I don't believe in getting comfortable just because everyone says you've arrived. You know, that's not what it's all about. Once you compromise yourself in one way, you compromise yourself in another way. And you've just opened the door to compromise, mediocrity, settling. And I don't mean, when I say mediocrity, I don't mean, I mean that we should constantly be aspiring, you know, to reach higher and higher and higher. We should never be comfortable where we are. You know, we should always be aspiring to know more and to better ourselves and to improve ourselves, because that's how we improve the world around us, by working within us. You improve yourself, light up the corner that you live on. You know, you may not touch a gazillion lives, but you can light up your own space. You know, 5 years ago, I was so thin-skinned. Whatever anybody said would just, oh, my God, they don't like this rhyme, and oh, my songs, and you know, and then one day I woke up, and it was like my skin was just, it was so thick, it was impenetrable by those fiery darts. They just had no effect, and I realized that was a strength and a confidence that only came from a higher source. And I know that a lot of the content in the songs is very heavy, you know, but see, fantasy is what people want, but reality is what they need. And I've just retired from the fantasy part. A lot of the music I did tonight was Bob Marley. You know, Bob Marley took what he did so seriously. For him, it was a priesthood. You know, it wasn't, for me, it's a priesthood. It's not just, you know, let me just write this joint, and, you know, I could do that. But for me, you know, for me to experience the high, it has to be something so connected. I could make money very easily. I could make records that are self-indulgent and, you know, basically self-promote me. I could do that, promote myself. It's very easy. As a matter of fact, you know, lyrically as an MC, that stuff comes easy. But in order to promote something higher, I mean, I feel now, at the ripe old age of 25, that the only thing that I could do is serve others. You understand what I'm saying? And because there are people who have not reached that point in their walk, you know, yes, there's a little anger, there's a little resentment, because you raise a standard. You know, you especially when you do it and you make some noise, you know, and you do it and people actually listen to what you have to say, and like your record is bumping on the radio and you're saying something that holds a mirror up to a lot of the negativity and self-indulgent things and messages. I, you know, just like a young person would think that, you know, the friends that my fifth grade friends are gonna be my friends forever, you know, throughout high school, throughout And it's not that they cease being your friends, but sometimes you just mature to a place, and some people get there faster, some people don't, you know, and you know, hopefully, ultimately, everyone catches up.
People who make the music, for me, it's transitional. It's expressing a moment. And the question is do I capture that and give that to the public, even though I may be past or beyond that moment? Does it still hold value? Is it still important for people, even though I may have evolved beyond, you know, that particular moment?
My whole life at a certain point was studio and you know, studio, hotel, stage, studio, stage, hotel, studio, stage, you know, and I was expressing, I was expressing everything from my past, everything that I had experienced prior to that studio stage time, and it was like, you know, you have to go back to the well.
I'm glad that I don't have to slave anymore, because music was my love. And because of everything I thought that had to accompany my music, it became my burden. It just got stolen from me. I said, what is this? How did this thing that I love so much, so easily and so quickly turn into something I loathe and hate?
Kids were always like, what does she have on? What is that? What are those shoes? Why'd you put those shoes with that shirt? That doesn't match. You know, and then I'd go, you know, it's cool. And then like 3 or 4 months later, they'd have it on. And I said, but wait a minute, you said that my shoes didn't match my shirt. Every day is a lesson in focus for me, you know, and not buying into sort of the world's concept of what you have to be. You know, I'm really try every day to be individual, and not just in, you know, my style or my look or my music, but in my approach to life. You know, even, you know, I don't want to be religious. I want to be spiritual. You know, anybody can be religious. Some people jog religiously. You know, you don't want to be that. You want to be spiritual. You want to have a relationship with God as opposed to doing what everyone else does. And it just, you know, it's about having that unique approach and finding out what works for you. And if what works for you may not work for someone else.
We compare ourselves amongst ourselves, you know. That's not the standard. You already are the standard. What are you trying to fit into a standard for? We were each created to be individual standards, you know, and we're trying to fit into a standard. It doesn't make any sense. You know Lauryn Hill, and you came to see Lauryn Hill, but this is the first time y'all meeting me. You see what I'm saying? Don't think you met me before. Okay, and as I grow, you're gonna meet me a little bit more. You're gonna be exposed to the real me a little bit more. I had to reintroduce myself to everybody I know, my mother and my father. Listen, y'all never knew me. I want to introduce you to me. I'm just getting to know me. And you know what? Anything that's not growing is dead. So we better be changing. You know, people would say to me, they will hold me hostage. And they seriously, emotionally hostage. They say, she's changing. The money's changing. I said, listen, the money's not changing me. God is changing me. I'm changing because that's a natural part of life. We're all supposed to change. Who wakes up and is the same way tomorrow?
Do you remember at the end when Neo like realized his potential? He started to see the binary code. You remember that? The whole world? Well, that's where I'm trying to be spiritually. I'm trying to see the word of God in the whole world. So every time that agent throws a punch, I'm like, I see you. Oh, okay. You know, I'm just catching his punches. You know, so I'm not afraid. You know, I'm not afraid because I'm starting to see that. You know, things are just, situations materialize themselves and, oh, he's an agent. You know, but here's the trick. Here's the trick. Here's the trick is that you have to remember that sometimes you can be an agent. You can be an agent to yourself. You can be an agent against someone else and not even realize that you're being used, you know? That's the matrix.
It's about freedom, you see. We could look at, you know, one human being, but it's about the spirit of freedom being taken out and how it's taken out in all of us.
So, I'm just not afraid of, you know, it's of no effect. It's immaterial to me because our enemies are not physical bodies. They're actually our family. They don't know it, and we don't always know it, but our enemies are not, you know, they're not flesh and blood. And our problems are not flesh and blood, even though we think they are.
God is saying get free. Confess, man. Understand that, look, everybody's going through the same stuff, same issues. It's just a bunch of repression. And I'm saying, man, life is too valuable, man, for us to sit here in these boxes all repressed, you know, afraid to admit what we're really going through. You know what I'm saying? I'm tired of that.
Life is continued work. It's constant learning. The whole concept of retirement, I don't even buy into. You know, we should constantly be working, maybe not physically working, but we could be spiritually, emotionally working toward bettering ourselves and bettering the lives of others around us. So I get really afraid of those little comfort, you know, those things that make us feel like, you know, we did something great. Because I've done nothing. I've done nothing. The world is filled with way too many bright people for us to still have the problems that we have in the world. It's going to be our shame, you know what I mean, that we don't sit together and create people who invest with thought and consideration and care to solve the world's problems. If we can do all these things that we do digitally, technologically, economically, we can feed people, we can educate people through poverty. We can solve the problems of poverty. Poverty isn't even something that should exist in this world at this point because we have wealth, we have intellect, we have the ability to develop and design and create whatever we want to. The question is do we want to? That's what we have to ask ourselves. You know, I've been away from a lot of things, you know, for a while now, and incubating, you know, ideas and doing what I needed to do to how do I say, to deal with the resistance that comes with making change in the world. You know, we ask ourselves, you know, how come these things haven't been around, or why was this thing not invented? There was a reason. There were forces that were set up to prevent, you know, certain patterns of evolution, certain patterns of development, right? All this street hustle, right? It would have dominated it if it really had, you know, access early on, which is why it was suppressed, you know what I mean? Which is why it was met with resistance. But we have the ability now to see the resistance, acknowledge it for what it is, and go beyond it and go past it. You know, and I think it just takes courageous folks, you know, who are not afraid to see the new world that's on the horizon, you know, separated by education and economics. You know, we actually can make spaces for everyone, but it requires that the creatives, the academics, you know, the intellectuals, those who think with their heart, and emotional intelligent ones, you know, all come together, you know, in the same platform with the same kind of driving and unifying forces to see this world improve. We have the answers. We have so many of the answers. We have the technology. We have the wealth. We just have to be willing to share it. And in order for us to do that, we have to do the work in and on ourselves so that we can be conduits of change and improvement for other people. Because that's really what it's about. We have the ability, you know, and that we always retain our right to our integrity, you know, that no amount of money or no kind of relationships compromise our ability to make decisions that aren't just money-based, but that are moral, that are ethical, that are right, that we evolve, you know, we evolve morally, emotionally, spiritually, ethically as we evolve technologically, financially. We just have to make sure that we're aligned.